All right, ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker this morning wears two important hats. He's responsible for the defense of the skies over North America, in which his primary asset is the National Guard. He also has other domestic federal responsibilities. General Terrence O'Shaughnessy just started wearing those two key hats in May. He came from Pacific Air Force in Hawaii, and then before that, South Korea. He's a decorated airman and leader and has done great things for our nation throughout his career. We're happy to host him here at NGAUS and to speak to us today. The chair recognizes the Sergeant at Arms.
The Sergeant at Arms announces the presence in the chamber of General Terrence J. O'Shaughnessy, the commander of the North American Aerospace Defense Command and U.S. Northern Command. He is escorted by Major General Terry M. Max Haston, the Vice Chair, Army of the National Guard Association of the United States. Major General Donald Dunbar, the Vice Chair, Air of the National Guard Association of the United States, and Major General Glenn Curtis, the Adjutant General of Louisiana.
The Sergeant at Arms will escort our distinguished guests to the podium.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So glad to have you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Hello. Thank you. How are you? Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Commander of the United States Army Northern Command, General O'Shaughnessy.
Well, good morning, everybody. Let me first just let everybody know how excited I am to be here. This is a real treat for me to be able to come see you, talk to you a little bit about NORTHCOM and NORAD, and thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I really want to say thanks to our host. Man, I would not want to be Mike Lowe from Colorado right now. Because Glenn, you know how to host a party. I mean, a conference here. It's last night was fantastic, and it's great to see so many old friends. To include, of course, General Engel. Really appreciate being able to serve with you and really a true partner in so much of what we do. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit today, kind of two main purposes. First is I'm going to, of course, tell you a little bit about NORTHCOM, a little bit about NORAD. And then the second piece is I want to highlight as I go through that something that you probably already know, but to reinforce, is that you cannot talk about NORTHCOM and NORAD without talking about the Guard. And you see at the bottom of the slide there, something we constantly remind ourselves at NORTHCOM and NORAD is we have the watch. And we take that quite seriously in the roles that we'll talk about. But at the end of this discussion, I want you to feel that same sense of responsibility and pride of saying that we have the watch, because when we say the we, I'm including you in that we. So if you see on the slide, there was 60th anniversary of NORAD this year. 60 years of a binational relationship with Canada and the defense of both Canada and the United States. In most crowds, 60 years is a long time. But I remember with my good friend Catfish Rice, when we go to our Corona discussions, where we have our Air Force 3 and 4 stars get together to talk. Of course, he's a Massachusetts Guardsman. And he used to talk about some of the history. And I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. And he would talk about the history of the Massachusetts Guard, which, if I remember correctly, goes back to about 13th of December, 1636. So I'm not good at math in public, but I think that's a bigger number than 60. And for all those years, the focus of that organization has been to protect and serve its citizens. And when I look at what we do at NORTHCOM and NORAD, we have common DNA, because that's what we do. We serve the citizens of America, and under NORAD, Canada. And so we're so interwoven, intertied with the same DNA in everything we do. And as I kind of walk through, I'm going to try to highlight some of the great things that are happening in NORTHCOM and NORAD, but simultaneously some of the great things that are happening within the Guard. Slide. So if you look at this slide, you see a full spectrum of things that are happening within NORTHCOM and NORAD. It goes from conventional warfighting, like aircraft carriers and fifth-gen fighters, all the way to defense support to civil authorities, fighting fires, some work on the border. And any given day, we're doing all of that, just like you guys are. And I find that since I've taken on this position, I watch the news in a much different lens than I used to. Because you cannot turn on the news and have something to come up that doesn't somehow involve NORTHCOM and NORAD. If we're talking about the issues on the border, we have a role in that, as do you. If you watch the things that happen just on the 10th of August with the stolen aircraft, we have a big role in that, and so do you. If you watch the forest fires that are in multiple states, we have a big role in that, as do you. And if you watch the things that are happening with things the Secretary of Defense talked to you about, with the global competition and the changing security environment that we're in, we have a big role in that, and so do you. And so I'll kind of walk through a little bit of this as we go through and then be able to take some questions when we wrap up. Slide. All right, so let's go talk details about NORAD and NORTHCOM. We'll start with NORAD. Of course, we do what most of you know NORAD for is we track Santa, right? Okay, we do a little more than that. But that's a pretty cool mission too, right? And so what I like to say when we talk about tracking Santa, if we can track Santa, you can imagine what else we can track, right? So when we look at this from the lens of what we're trying to do in NORAD is first aerospace warning. What that means is anything that is coming in towards the United States or Canada, we make a determination if that's a threat or not. And in the case of, say, for example, ballistic missile, if it is, then we push it off to NORTHCOM for the ballistic missile defense. If it's, say, a cruise missile, then we would take that on under our NORAD construct. We also look at things that we can do to actually take care of that. So that's the aerospace control. And that's what you see is the aircraft on alert like we saw happen in Portland just a short time ago. And then, of course, we added in 2006 Maritime Warning, which is something you may not think of NORAD as doing. But similarly to the aerospace warning, we're looking out in the maritime domain to see what kind of threats might be inbound. And that could be anything from a Russian submarine off the coast. It could be a cruise ship that has a person of interest on it that we need to track. And so the full spectrum on the maritime warning piece. Very complementary with the command of NORTHCOM. So separate commands, but very complementary. First, number one priority, Homeland Defense. The role that we do in Homeland Defense is absolutely intertwined with the role that you play, and you're a huge part of that. I'm going to give you some salient examples of that. But there is something very sacred about waking up in the morning and realizing your responsibility is the defense of the United States of America. That's something all of us in NORTHCOM in particular take very seriously, and it's something that we need your continued effort and help in order to do in a changing security environment. And part of what I'm going to talk about towards the end is the things that we need to do looking forward for Homeland Defense. Because Homeland Defense is changing. We used to think about the sanctuary that we have with oceans and friendly countries on north and south. But that's changing with adversaries that are able to actually reach out and touch us now. So we have to rethink Homeland Defense because it's not a sanctuary. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then defense support to civil authorities. Of course, we think about hurricanes. We think about the incredible response from last year, the multiple hurricanes. But we also need to think about that from the threat aspect as well, because that defense support to civil authorities isn't just against natural disasters. That's also going to apply if we have a nefarious actor, and we have to be prepared for that equally as much as we're prepared for the natural disasters. And then theater security cooperation. Of course, working with Canada, Mexico, and the Bahamas are our close partners and allies. Critically important, and you play a pretty big role in that as well. Slide. So you're going, holy smokes, he's going to talk about an org chart. But you can't talk about an organization without an org chart, right? Well, actually, that's not what I'm going to really highlight here. But if you look at the org chart here, and if you click the slide, the point I want to make is that org chart is made up of Guard, active duty, reserve, Canadians, and civilians. And if you look at those positions in yellow, those are our guardsmen serving. My deputy commander, Reynold Hoover, great American. Incredible experience in a civilian side, working in the White House. In fact, working with Secretary Nielsen back in the day at the White House. Incredible experience that he brings to the fight with his Guard experience as well. And a true partner and an integral member of our command team. If you look at Rich Kalana, our new chief of staff, relatively new to that position, but he served within the NORTHCOM construct already, so he comes and brings a wealth of experience with us. Those two individuals, as well as if you look at General Kramer, Jeff Kramer, these are not the special assistants or military assistants that you might traditionally see at COCOMs, which are equally as important. But these are actually billets within the organization designed to be filled by the most qualified. And so they're integral to what we do as a command, and they're integral to our day-to-day performance. And frankly, we couldn't do it without them. In fact, I can tell you, we have more Guard general officers on the staff than we have active duty general officers on the staff in the headquarters. And that's with purpose, because of what the Guard brings to the fight and the experience that they bring. Slide. So on the component side, we have traditional components just like you would in any combatant command. And if you click the slide again, you see, once again, very heavily populated, especially on the aft north side, which we'll talk about, and the R north side with respect to the Guard contributions there. So integral part of that, and we'll get into some of the details of that. But again, everything we do at NORTHCOM, everything we do at NORAD, you are a part of. Slide. All right, so I started listing up all the Guard forces in the air domain that contribute, and the slide just got too busy. So I just made it generic and just put ACA on there. And those are actually all of our forces within NORAD and NORTHCOM from the air domain. And if you click the slide, we'll add the land domain in there. And again, it got too busy in the slide to put the individual units, but if you click one more time, that's the Guard participation in that. And the details are not as important as the overall concept is that you are NORTHCOM and you are NORAD. Slide. Some of the things that you bring to the fight, we have over 10,000 guardsmen that are trained in SBIRN, a critical skill that we hope we don't have to use, but if we do need it, we need it, and we need it in the right places where it can be immediately applied. And we have 57 teams that are scattered throughout the United States and their territories for that response. A lot of people don't know about that. We don't talk about that much, but it's critically important. Of course, the traditional mission sets that we see with the Noble Eagle and all that goes into that to include the tanker support required of that. Something else we don't talk about that much from the Guard perspective, but is absolutely critical, is our ballistic missile defense in Colorado, in California, and in Alaska. Critical members of defending the homeland there. Slide. So I'm going to go through a couple examples, a couple vignettes, just to highlight some of the great things that are happening within NORTHCOM and NORAD, and part of that will include a whole lot of happenings with the Guard. So we went down to the Rio Grande Valley to talk to our CBP brethren who are doing a very difficult mission. And we went down there. If you look at the picture on the top left there, that's John Nichols standing next to me from Texas. All right. But to put this in perspective, on any given day, John and his team has about 1,100. I think today it's actually 1,134 folks that are helping out with the border under state authority. We don't have a fraction of that. The point is, though, we have to do it and be complementary. And we have to see what are the things that we can do together as we support a mission set, like helping out on the border. What are the things we can do that are complementary? What can we from the federal side bring to the fight that is complementary to what you're already bringing from the state side? And having the ability to go down there with John and talk to the CBP, it's critically important for me to help understand what it is that we can do from the federal side to support what they're already doing from the state side. And then standing next to John is Laurie Yaeger. She's our commander of the NORTHCOM JTF North in Texas, but she's a California guardsman serving in Texas and doing an incredibly important role leading 148 airmen and soldiers to help out with the border. And I wasn't exactly sure what they did. And when I went down there, we heard directly from the Customs and Border Protection folks how critically important her role has been in leading that effort to provide them some intel, provide them some increased mobility, and in some cases, just provide them some admin support, which allows them to put their folks on the border for the direct involvement in protecting the border. But huge, huge role that she's playing down there, and we're thankful that Dave Baldwin's let us keep her there for a little bit. Slide. Okay, speaking of Dave, went down to see Dave Baldwin and his team in California, and look at the fires. Like so many of the things we do, well covered in the media, perhaps, but going down there and seeing the folks, going down there and flying over the neighborhoods that have been devastated. It's one thing to see something on CNN or Fox News. It's quite another to be looking down at the hulk of a home that used to be where somebody lived. And we, in the federal side, need to figure out how do we help our state partners here. And so Dave Baldwin was kind. He took us out on a tour. That's actually Dave's knee right there. You can't really see him too well, but that's his knee. But as a tag of a state that has incredible capability and capacity, trying to figure out what from the federal side can we add to that to help their efforts. This got a little bit interesting because we have, of course, the National Interagency Fire Center that tries to run from the federal side some of the coordination with the state in the fighting the fires. This particular fire is on state land, it's on federal land. Fire doesn't care. It just goes where the fire goes, right? It doesn't care whether it's state land or federal land. And so we're trying to figure out how do we support that from the federal. Traditionally, we'd use the DCO, Defense Coordination Officer. But as we talked to Dave, that just wasn't going to be able to be integrated into the effort that they're doing with CAL FIRE and the work that they were doing. We're going to bring a couple hundred Title X folks in, and it was going to be very difficult to integrate them in with the state effort if we brought them in under the DCO, which is the traditional way to do it. And so we said, okay, how can we do this better? So working with Dave, we figured out that, hey, maybe we can use that dual status commander thing, right? We use that a lot in other endeavors. We use that in hurricane response. Why can't we use it in fire response? And of course, got the JAGs involved. They say, yep, it's legal. Should be able to do it. Now, as we've tried to push that up the chain, there's some natural inertia when you try to do something different, right? So we had a little inertia from DC. But because of the close coordination, because of really trying to understand what are the nuances that General Baldwin and his team were having to deal with, we were able to meet with the DepSecDef and actually get approval to use a dual status commander. So Rob Spano was selected. He's in command right now as a dual status commander with 233 or so Title X folks that are fully integrated into the effort using that dual status role of General Baldwin and his folks to fight these fires. The real lesson that I got out of this scenario as it went is communication. Understanding what the requirements are, what the needs are, what the nuances are, and together we can find a solution that will satisfy the federal and the state requirements. And I think it's a great example of that. Slide. I should have mentioned the MAFs there. The MAFs, of course, 6 of the 8 MAFs we have are in the Guard, and they're critical to our firefighting. Okay, some of you may have seen on the 10th of August where we had a little incident. Stolen aircraft out of SeaTac. And the response to that is one that goes all the way from the Secretary of Defense on the phone, which he was, myself as the NORAD commander on the phone in the command post, all the way down through 1st Air Force as CONAR, the WADs we'll talk about, and then all the way down to the fighter wing responded. So let me tell you a little story. The guy standing right next to me, his name's Goblin. Goblin was on alert that day. First time sitting alert as a flight lead. Brand new flight lead sitting on alert. Gets a call, his wife's pregnant. That, of course, he knew. But she's got to go to the hospital because she's in the labor, and he's on alert. Okay, they get a plan. They call in the backup. Come right about that time, they get the suit up call, which means something's happening. Don't know yet. Don't know if you're going to have to respond, but suit up. Put the G suit on, get ready to go. He does that, and before the help could come in, they get the actual scramble call. So here's this guy, first time sitting on alert as a flight lead. His wife's in labor, on the way to the hospital. What's he to do? He's got a mission to do. As he jumps in the airplane and goes off, he gets the call, cleared supersonic, right from takeoff. Talk about a helmet fire. You're launching, your wife's pregnant, she's in labor, and you're not just launching on a Joe Bag of Donuts intercept. They're telling you go supersonic because it's that critical that you got to get there right now. And it's the first time you're doing it as a flight lead. He goes up and does a magnificent job. Kept that aircraft out of populated areas, helping to protect the folks on the ground. So, good news is, he's able to make it back. We scrambled the tanker. We weren't sure if he was going to have to divert because it ran out of gas because he's going so fast. Scrambled the tanker, got the gas, and he got to go home. And he got to make it to the hospital. His wife, Kara, had a baby, Josie. So we gave Josie a little teddy bear with a little NORAD bling on it. And we're thinking about 20 years from now, she's going to be a great officer in the NORAD headquarters. Next to him is Khan, the wing commander, and besides him is Clyde, the wingman for that event. Worth noting is you got 2 pilots there that scrambled. One was a homegrown kid. Grew up in that organization, went to pilot training, got trained, got qualified, got checked out. And the other was an active duty pilot for 11 years and then transitioned in. To me, it shows the beauty of our system, right? Both doing great things. 2 different paths to get there, and the mixing of the active duty and the Guard and how we develop them. And then to show the wealth of experience, if you look, 2 of those crew chiefs that are standing in the back, they were on alert 9/11. Those very crew chiefs that launched those F-15s in this incident were also on alert during 9/11. That shows the experience level that the Guard brings. Slide. All right, the other part, critical teammates of this, was the WADs. So these are the folks that do the command and control at the local level to try to direct those pilots into that aircraft that needs to be intercepted. So that's Brian Culp I'm giving a coin to there. So Brian wasn't at work that day. He was at home. Watching the news, see something happening. What do? You run to the sound of gunfire, right? It's in our DNA. So that's what he did. Wasn't on duty, had no responsibility to be at work. He runs into work. And he ends up helping the controller in a critical way to help get those aircraft to do a good intercept. The guy next to him, Sergeant Wood, Dayton Wood, His experience helped because what happened was the aircraft, as it took off, didn't turn its transponder on. In other words, there was no squawk, so the FAA radars were having a hard time seeing them. So Sergeant Wood was able to point them out and use the raw radar returns and turn that into something that we could actually run an intercept on. And Sergeant Pierce in the top right there, he's explained to me what he had to do to take those raw radar returns that are in one system and bring them over to another system to be able to make them something that they can push information-wise to the Eagles. And it was complicated, but his experience allowed him to do that. In fact, it was really complicated because that aircraft went right behind the mountain when it first took off. And it was unclear, because there was no radar of it, because it was behind the mountain, he wasn't squawking, whether it had crashed or whether it came out. But because of his skill of being able to dig it out of the radar returns, they were able to identify and re-tag that radar return and get the Eagles on them. And Greg Lewis is the commander down there, and Freddie Kruger on my right. Great leaders, leading airmen in an absolutely critical mission set at WADS. So my hat's off to those guys. Slide. All right, Alaska. That's a tough operating environment. One of the units up there, the 212 Rescue Squadron, is a guard unit responsible for responding to those that need help in the Arctic environment. One of the things I want to highlight, besides the amazing rescue stories that we could go on about and talk about, is their innovation. One of the things that unit has put together, as we see more and more activity in these harsh environments, is the ability to respond on a larger scale. So by task, they're designed to go out and rescue a couple hikers, maybe a small aircraft that goes down. But they realized there was a potential for a larger incident to happen. And there was no real response capability in the U.S. to be able to respond to that. We worked with our Canadian partners. They had a large capability that would take some time to get there, but it could cover a lot of people. To give them tents and living facilities if we had to have a mass casualty situation, we could get there. But it was going to take them about a week to get there. A week in the Arctic, you're not going to be there in a week. And so on their own, they developed a 28-person capacity that can be loaded up in C-130s or C-17s, dropped out the back, that would give a week's worth of living in incredibly harsh environments that they can just drop out the back, to include the fuel, the heaters, the tents, mobility with some vehicles, all designed by this squadron with no tasking to do so. But they knew that was the environment that folks were operating in, and we needed to have a response to that. So that innovation is amazing to see. Slide. All right, Spade Williams is the commander of 1st Air Force, doing amazing things down there. We talked about the whole chain that has to come together for an event like the 10th of August. Well, he's right in the middle of it as the 1st Air Force commander. The work that he's doing down there is also, besides the day-to-day work that we're having to do, sitting alert and command and control in that, we're also looking to the future to figure out, how do we command and control this? How do we take his region, which is right now the continental U.S., and tie it into the Alaska region and the Canadian region in a more seamless manner? Trying to make it a CFAC, a Norad CFAC. And he and his team have gone through some iterations and practice to try to develop that. And we're really close, I think, to pulling the trigger. We're going to exercise it one more time here in the next month or so. But the innovation, again, and the foresight and the experience that he brings to the fight to be able to do that is absolutely incredible. He's also constantly worrying about readiness, making sure we maintain that readiness. As our president travels around, sometimes to challenging locations, he's been able to respond and find ways that we can do it to maintain that alert that we have to do while maintaining the readiness. So, for example, when the president goes to Bedminster, incredibly challenging environment because of the airspace density. General Williams and his team have gone and developed a way to not have to do a cap that just for 24/7 is just flying circles, but can do it from a ground alert, maintain that readiness. And through several iterations, they were able to come up with a very effective means of doing so. And very difficult coordination with the FAA, very difficult environment just because of the density of the air traffic there, but they were able to work their way through that in a expeditious manner to come up with a great plan that we're now executing in the Bedminster area. And then sitting next to me there is Pete Byrne. Pete Byrne is working, he's a Colorado Guardsman, but he's working for Spade Williams down in Florida. There's Mike. Is Mike here from Florida? Should be really proud of that team out in 1st Air Force. But Pete's doing such a good job there, we stole him. So Pete's not working for me back in Colorado, but it shows again the great experience that we're able to take his experience that he's been doing working for Spade, we bring it up to our headquarters, and now we can apply that same experience working for us up here. Slide. Okay, the hurricane season last year. Knock on wood that we're not going to replicate that this year. But my hat's off to you for your response. From the Title X side, it was the biggest one in our history, but it pales in comparison to the response from the Guard. We learned a lot of lessons from that response, and clearly, hurricanes that hit big states like Texas and Florida with a lot of capability and capacity are fundamentally different than, say, Puerto Rico. And so we have to apply different templates as we look at each of those. And we've garnered a lot of those lessons learned, and I appreciate the great collaboration that we've had to be able to learn those lessons and then push them forward into this season so we're better prepared. So thanks for what you did last year, and as importantly, thank you for the preparation for this year. Slide. All right, one thing I want to talk about is a new role that we're taking on at NORTHCOM, and that is the discus synchronizer. Our intent, I want to be clear about this because it can be misinterpreted. Our intent is not to command and control any differently than we've been commanding and controlling. Our intent, though, is to be a collator of information. Because one of the things we found, because of the massive response that we had in last year's hurricane season, it was hard to understand who was doing what and when different capabilities and capacities were able to get there. So to try to help that, in close coordination with Joe and Gail and the entire Guard team, as well as Corps of Engineers and DLA, we're trying to be that collator. So we want to understand what's the ask, what's the common ask picture, i.e. what are the requirements? We want to be able to put them all in one piece of paper and share them with everybody. And then we want to know who's responding to it. So we're not telling you to respond to it, we want to know who's responding to it. So if you have through the EMAC, a state-to-state agreement, we're not telling you how to do that. We're just asking that you let us know that you're doing that. And now we don't have to respond from the federal side to that same requirement. And then we're trying to get that broader operational picture that we can put together so that everyone has that is working off the same sheet of music. Now, this is easy to say, a little trickier to do. I think we're postured well, though. A lot of great communication already happening, and I think we're set up for success. But I want to be clear here that as we try to gather this information, we are in no way, shape, or form trying to change the actual command and control and or the direction that you're getting in order to do things. Now that said, hopefully as this common understanding of what the requirements are, you may on your own change what you're doing based on the essay that you're getting from this common collation of the information. Slide. So here's a quick example of that. This is the border support aspect of it. And I want you to take careful note of the top right side there. It shows we get about 20 folks directly. And then again, you look down to Texas, just as an example, with over 1,100. But we're collating this information and sending it up. We're not telling John what to do with his folks. We're just getting the information, funnel it up. Seems to be working okay. But I ask you your help in this and your support in this. And again, I want to be clear that we're not trying to do something different from a command and control. Slide. All right, so here's what I need from you. Open communication. That's the foot stomper. That dialogue. So we can share an understanding of what the needs are in a response, what the nuances are, maybe what the thoughts of your governor are, so that we can work together and come up with a solution that's going to work for both of us. Just like we did in this hurricane season, we need honest assessments and candid debriefs. And then we got to actually do something with what we learn, right? Not lesson learned until you actually do something with that information. I think we have for this upcoming hurricane season as an example. And I would just ask that please use the L&O network. Please communicate with our staff. It's great for me to be able to meet some of the tags that I haven't had a chance to meet yet. I look forward to meeting more of you. If you haven't, if you're a tag and you're here and I haven't had a chance to shake your hand, I'd love to do so after the session and just so the first time that we're talking isn't in crisis. And then really as we get down to understanding what are your authorities, what are our authorities, and understanding what the options are as we go to figure out what's the way ahead. And then if you click the slide, all right, I want you on my staff, on our team, the broad team, right? Because of what you bring to the fight, because of the incredible experience that you bring. So we're always looking for a few good men and women, and we'd love to have you on our team, either directly, working for us in the headquarters, working through the components, or indirectly in the way that we've seen some great examples in some of the vignettes that we talked about. Slide. All right, let me kind of transition here just a little bit, and I want to talk about the way ahead for NORTHCOM and NORAD, and I think the Secretary talked a little bit about this, but I say that because it goes back to the very first thing I talked about, which says that we have the watch, and you are part of that we. And so I need you thinking about these things as well, not just us on the headquarters side. The world's changed, right? Russia and China, peer competitors, security environment is fundamentally changed. And that middle bottom square is the most critical of all these that are on there, is a homeland is no longer a sanctuary. Our adversaries have the ability to reach out and touch us. And we have to think about our defense in different ways than we have in the past. That means we need to fundamentally rethink when we say homeland defense of how are we going to do that against a peer competitor. What are the capability and capacities that we need? Good example is the AESA radars that we're trying to put in the F-16s that we got traction on, making progress on. Why are those critical? They're not critical for a traditional O&E type event of a hijacked airliner, something like that, but they are critical for cruise missile defense. They are critical for a peer competitor. And so we need to make sure that stays on track. But looking for those types of things and other things like that we need to invest in. And that investment has to be active duty, guard, and reserve so that together we have the capability we need to defend this great nation. Slide. It has really been a treat to be able to come here, meet so many of you, tell you a little bit about what we're doing at NORTHCOM and NORAD, and hopefully make sure that you understand that when we say we have the watch, you are absolutely part of the we, and we have a shared responsibility to protect our great nation. So with that, let me open up to see if there's any questions.
Do we have any questions for the general? Sir, right center.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Sanchez from the 150th. I fly the mighty RC-26, and all the missions that you put up on the board, hurricanes, CAL FIRES, NIFC, border support, we've flown them all. But there is another mission that you didn't put up there that we continually fight in, and that's the war on drugs. How do you see the future of the National Guard counter-drug program, and how can we count on your support for this continued battle that's leaving 72,000 people dead, Americans dead in 2017 alone?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Clearly, this is a threat to our nation. If you think about the numbers, and as you mentioned, the opioid alone, that if we had those same numbers in a campaign overseas, it would be viewed in an entirely different lens. And so we feel, well, since we are not the primary federal agency responsible for it, we do feel that we can add to the fight. I think we're continuing to see, in fact, just over this weekend, there's been some communication between the SecDef, ourselves, the chairman, and Southcom about how can we work better for the Southern Avenue approach to be able to add, from the DoD perspective, add to the work that Homeland Security is already doing. So my pitch, or my response would be, we are not looking to take over that mission, but we are looking for increasing ways that we can apply the unique military capability that we bring to that mission set. And I think you'll see more and more of that happening over the upcoming months. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, we have a question from General Dunbar behind
Yep.
you.
Can I ask him up here, sir?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So thank you for joining us today. My question, just listening to your presentation and all of us being very familiar with the great work of NORTHCOM, one of the things that recently changed, it's a concern to me and I think it's a concern to the association, is the law that used to say that either the commander or the vice commander had to be a member of the National Guard. That's been
Right.
changed. I realize it's the will of Congress, but laws get changed, can be changed again, and I believe this association will ask Congress to reconsider that. My ask for you, as you contemplate what you just laid out, the importance of the National Guard in the Homeland, which is very unique as a COCOM, as you know, right? It's not the same thing in Southcom, it's not the same thing in UCOM or PACOM, but the Homeland, where the National Guard under the Governor's command and control is doing so much on a day-to-day basis. I believe, as one adjutant general, that it is essential we rethink that law and put that back into place. And I only ask from you, not only your comments this morning, but when the time comes that you're testifying, if that question comes up, that you give that some consideration, and if it resonates with you, to maybe communicate your best military advice back to Congress that maybe we got that one a little bit wrong. Over to you, sir.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for highlighting that, because it is an important as we go forward. So first, to maybe put some fidelity on this, so basically the law was changed that you could actually have either a Guard or Reserve officer in that position is what the law changed. So both the commander and the deputy now can be Guard or Reserve. I will say, just from my time in the seat, what I get from Reynold Hoover, who is my deputy right now, Guardsman, is more than just his skill set that he brings in being the deputy, but his experiences that he's had with this environment, which are extremely helpful for me. As we look at the entire staff, I think we have to look at it from the perspective of what's the balance of the entire staff. In this case, Rich Gallant, as an example, has just been hired as our chief of staff to try to keep senior leadership that will have Guard DNA, if you will, and help me understand some of the nuances and pieces that Rich brings to the fight. So I think I will say that it is absolutely critical that we have senior leadership from the Guard on the staff. I think it's absolutely critical that our balance within the staff includes active duty, Guard, and Reserve. I think as we look at each individual selection, that we have to bear in mind what we just went through in this brief, which is the contributions of the Guard to this mission set is extreme.
Sir, we greatly appreciate you taking the time to be with us and spend time with us, and most importantly, so, sir, most importantly, we appreciate the service of you and your family. And in recognition of your service as an aviator, we want to present you with our holiday ornament, which is Trailblazers in the Sky, and let you know National Guard Association is here to support you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.
Will the Sergeant at Arms please escort our guests from the podium?